This is problem 3-120. This is from your week 9 worksheet. It reads, in a certain town, 45% of the population have dimples. Okay, those are like the things when you smile, little dots on your cheeks. 70% have a widow's peak. Okay, that has to do with your hairline. Assuming that these physical traits are independent, what is the probability the randomly selected person has both dimples and a widow's peak? So that's our first problem. Then our second part of the problem is, what is the probability that he or she will have neither? So we have two separate problems in this one problem. So we're gonna have to start by drawing a probability model. There's two different ways you can draw these probability models. One of them is by an area model. That's the one with the squares. Another one is a tree diagram. I'll show you how to do both, okay? So starting out, let's do an area model. Okay, so it says right here, in a certain town, 45% have dimples. So I'm gonna make the top dimples. Okay, so 45% are yeses. So yes, they have them. That would be 45%. No, they don't. That would be, we'll get into that. On the left side, we have the widow's peak. Okay, so either yes, you have it, or no, you don't. Okay? So let's get into these percents here, because we can't use percents in our calculations. We'll convert it back at the end. But in order to use these percentages in our calculations, we first have to transfer them to decimals. Okay? So I'm going to change 45%, which is my yes, to a decimal. So to change it to a decimal, all you do is you move the decimal 2 places to the left. So in this case, it would be 0.45 are yes. Okay. Now, what about no? So here, the key is that it's either yes or no, and all of your probabilities have to add up to 1. So what you can do is you can do 1 minus 0.45, and that'll tell you how many no's you have, which would be 0.55. So all I did was I took 1 minus 0.45 to tell me what's the percent chance that I have a no. Okay, what about widow's peak? 70% is a yes, so I'm going to write 0.70, which means that if it adds up to 1, no would be 0.30. Okay, now we get to multiply. I'm going to go grab a calculator real quick. Stay with me. All right, so now I need to multiply to fill in this area model. It's just like any other area model that you've had before. So what you're going to do is you're going to be multiplying 0.70 times 0.45, and that'll tell you the probability that it's a yes and a yes. For yes dimples, yes widow's peak. So let's go ahead and do that on the calculator. I'll show you how to do it. So here's the calculator. All I'm going to do is 0.45 times 0.70. Enter. So I end up with 0.315. Okay, now I'm going to do that for the rest of them. Second part, 0.30 times 0.45, 0.135. That's going to go in the bottom left box. I'm going to do it all right now, though. 0.385. Oops. And that would go in the bottom right corner. Okay? So for 0.30 times 0.45, I got 0.135. For 0.55 times 0.70, I got 0.385. And then for 0.55 times 0.30, I got 0.165. One thing to note here, these sides add up to 1, these sides add up to 1, and also if you're unsure on the test, if you did it right, all 4 of these boxes should add up to 1 as well. So that's one way you can check your answer. Let's see if we did it right. Oops. 0.315 plus 0.385 plus 0.135 plus 0.165. Hang on, I got a low battery. Let me just close that. There we go. Okay, so I added all those together, and what do you know? It equals 1. Right? So that means I did it right. So let's see. What's the first question asking for? What's the probability that a randomly selected person has both dimples and a widow's peak? So that has to be a yes for both. So I'm going to go in with a blue pen. So yes for both. So I go to my dimples. I check yes. So these two are both yes for dimples. Then I check my widow's peak. These two are both yes for widow's peak. Where they intersect would be right here. This right here, 0.315, is yes dimples, yes widow's peak. So my answer for yes and yes, I guess I could call it both. I'll call it that. So both is 0.315. But if we want to answer this as a percent, the way that they gave it to us, we have to move that decimal back over to the right 2 places, sorry. 2 places, not 3. Only move it 2 places. So that would be 31.5%. That's your answer for both. What is the probability that he or she will have neither? So that would be no and no. Okay, I'll circle that one with red pen. So no and no, where that intersects, is 0.165. So none, I'll put 0.165. What if I want it in a percent? If I want it in a percent, I move that decimal back over 2 places. 16.5%. Keep in mind on the test, we might ask you for you to write your probabilities a fraction, a decimal, or a percent. So be ready for any of those, okay? So that's how to solve it with an area model. Now I'm going to show you how to solve it with a tree diagram. 2 different ways to solve it. Both of them will get you the same exact answer. So pause it right now and copy this down if you haven't already. I'll get out of the way. There you go, okay? We're going to move on to a tree diagram. So if you want to do the area model, if that's what you're comfortable with, good, do it. But if you want to check out what a tree diagram looks like, I'll show you right now. So for a tree diagram, we always need to check how many opportunities do we have for each part of the problem. So for the first part, we have 2 options. We can either yes have a widow's peak, or no, we don't have a widow's peak. Actually, let's start with dimples, sorry. We can either yes have dimples, or no have dimples, or do not have dimples, right? So I'm going to start my tree diagram. So I'm going to write dimples here, and then no dimples. Okay, so those are my 2 options. Then from here, I have 2 more options. I can either yes have a widow's peak, or no, do not have a widow's peak. So that would be widow's peak or no widow's peak. And then same exact thing, widow's peak or no widow's peak. Okay? So now what we need to do is we need to assign probabilities to each of these branches. Okay? So here's where the numbers come in. So remember, we changed it to a decimal first. So 0.45 is yes have dimples. So I'm going to write 0.45 on this branch. So they don't have dimples. Remember, they add up to 1. So this one has to be 0.55. Okay? Now, what's the probability that yes, they do have a widow's peak? That would be 0.70. That's given. And then subtract it from 1. That gives you 0.30. And this one are going to be exactly the same. Okay? Because you still have 0.70 chance to get a widow's peak and a 0.30 chance to not. So now all we do is we choose our outcomes and we multiply down the branches. And you'll see what I mean in just a second here. But basically what I'm going to do is we're going to see what we want first. So the first question was asking what's the probability they have both. So that would be yes, Dimples. So I follow this branch. And then yes, Widow's Peak. So I follow this top branch again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply down the branch. So that would be 0.45 times 0.70. So we grab our calculator. 0.45 times 0.70, right? We've done this before on the area model, but it equals 0.315. So the probability for this route is 0.315, which if we want that in percent, move the decimal over 2 places, 31.5%. Okay? Now, the other question was asking what's the probability that they have no Dimples and no Widow's Peak. So in that case, we're going to take 0.55 times 0.30. Oops. And that equals 0.165. So I multiplied down the branch again. I'll circle this one in black. I multiplied down the branch again. No and no. And that got me 0.165, which if I move the decimal over 2 places is 16.5%. Which if you remember, that's exactly the answer we got for the last one. So it doesn't matter if you use the area model or the tree diagram. We might ask you to use one or the other, but typically we leave it up to you guys. You'll just have to be able to draw each of them. So make sure you know how to draw an area model if you want to do an area model. Make sure you know how to draw a tree diagram if you know how to do it, if you have to do a tree diagram. But these are the answers. Remember, we got the same exact answers. So do whichever feels most comfortable for you. And that's about it. That's how you do one of these problems.